Welcome to the Organisational Inclusionist. I'm your host, Grace Mosuro. In this podcast series, we'll be delving deep into the pressing issues surrounding equality, diversity, and inclusion in both the workplace and the broader world. My goal is to foster understanding, inspire change, and amplify the voices of those advocating for a more inclusive and equitable society. Throughout this series, I'll be engaging in candid discussions with leaders, experts, activists, and changemakers from various fields. We'll explore the challenges, successes, and evolving landscapes of equality, diversity, and inclusion. From dismantling systematic biases to promoting equal opportunities for all, we'll touch on a broad range of topics. But we won't stop at discussing problems. We'll actively seek out solutions and actionable steps to drive positive change. Our aim is to inspire and empower you, our listeners, to take an active role in making the world a better place for everyone. This is the Organisational Inclusionist. Let's get started. Welcome everyone to today's episode of the Organisational Inclusionist. My name is Grace Mosuro and I am your host. And today I am joined by the wonderful Nzinga, who is the Aviation Agony aunt, which I absolutely love. So Nzinga, I never kind of give the introductions anymore because I just feel like I don't do them justice. So I would love it if you could please introduce yourself and what you do to our audience or our listeners.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Grace, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to today's podcast. And in terms of who I am, well, I'm Nzinga Orgill. I'm the founder and CEO of Avi-I Solutions, and we are a consultancy that works within organisations in the aviation sector. And our mission is to create inclusive travel for all passengers, especially those from marginalised communities. And, the reason why we do this, there are many reasons, additional revenue, to establish organizations as global thought leaders, reputation, but because it's the right thing to do, people deserve to feel empowered to have the journey they decide they want to have. And we can all play a part in enabling that and supporting and facilitating that. And we do lots of different things. We do audits, we do training, we use a lot of innovation, all things that are woven into our 20-year plus background in transport. And we really know we like to be of service and prioritize the needs of those who often don't get heard, who don't get seen, and who do not have exceptional travel experiences. That's kind of me and what we do here at Avi-I Solutions.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And thank you so much for joining me. I love what you do. Obviously, we both work in inclusion, which is fantastic, but we work in different sectors. And when I came across or when we spoke a few weeks ago and you were talking me through what you do, I was like, wow, I don't know anyone else that specializes in aviation. And that is without a doubt an area that needs inclusion. And we're going to get into that a little bit more shortly because I've got a couple of stories to tell about why I think you're necessary in the industry.
I've got plenty to do.
But the first thing I wanted to find out is you obviously you call yourself the Aviation Agony aunt. What led to you becoming that? What led you to doing the work that you do in this space?
Oh, so many things. First of all, like I mentioned, I've got 20 years plus in the transport sector. A majority of that was in the aviation sector. And, I started off my journey in aviation frontline. So I really got to be close to passengers and people who were actually using the airport, whether it's for, traveling for business, for pleasure. And allow me to really understand people a little bit more than what I previously had done. There's nothing like putting people in a very, I won't say stressful environment, but the airports can be quite noisy. They can be quite difficult to navigate if you don't know how to find your way around. So you meet people in very different emotional states. And then also, I've done quite a bit of work in the EDI space as well. I'd really, prior to setting up Avi-I Solutions, I'd set up my consultancy, Race Expert Limited, that focused on anti-racism and was able to work across a couple of sectors and understanding the challenges of, people who face racism and of organizations who want to eliminate that. And, for me, what became glaringly obvious was that there is a disconnect between striving to create an inclusive culture and speaking to the people who are impacted. It's almost like, I know what's going to work. I know it's going to fit. Let me implement it. Let me embed it into the organization, into policies and processes, and then I expect you, the person who's impacted, to be grateful for that. And I
Mm.
thought that's the piece that we're missing, you know. And when I think of, because I'm a little bit older, back in the day when you used to read the you know, the newspapers, you used to have the Agony art columns where people used to write in and share, you know, what they were experiencing pain with, and they get someone who would guide them and advise them and handhold them through finding the right solutions for them. And I just thought, in aviation, there is nobody who does that. You know, you've got
Mm.
bodies and collections of organizations that do lots of great things, but there isn't a go-to person just to allow people to share the experiences they're having, but then, you know, us to collaborate in terms of finding the solution. And that's
Mm.
one thing that's really important to me, Grace. Collaboration isn't just about bringing in lots of diverse perspectives. It's about bringing in the right diversity in those perspectives. And that
Yeah.
often involves bringing in the end users and those that are most impacted. So I thought, I'm going to be that for aviation. I'm going to be that agony aunt that they clearly need, that they don't know yet. They might not, well, they want, but I'm going to be of service and just listen, guide, and support people to find the solutions that empower them to have the journeys they want to have.
Amazing. And how has the sector responded to you being here?
So, relatively well. I think you've got people that sit within different camps. You know, you've got those airports and organisations that identify that they have got challenges and there's work to be done. They don't know where to start from, so they really value the services that we offer because, again, it's not just coming in with a solution. We really do some digging around. We use data and analytics to try and understand what are your pain points, not what are
Mm.
the industry's pain points. What are your pain points? What does your airport need to do to make that exceptional passenger experience for all passengers? And you've got people who sit in the camp of they understand there's work to be done and they've done a little bit already there. They might need a little bit of support in terms of reviewing that work or changing and amending it if there are any industry or regulatory changes. And then you've got others who are comfortable and happy with what they're doing and they believe that they're providing the best service they currently can, engaging with, you know, organizations that can support them. And I think what I would want to say is that Avi-I Solutions is there for every single one of them. You know,
Mm.
whether or not you are a client or customer of ours, we are still here to support you. You know, this work doesn't happen because we're only supporting those who identify that they need the help. It happens because we're sharing information and we're empowering each other with everything that we learn and everything that we acquire in the process of doing so.
Amazing. So for anyone wondering, like when I heard of aviation, or when my understanding of aviation, or when I think about aviation, I think about airlines, right? I just think about BA, Virgin, like the people I fly with or I book my tickets with. Is aviation bigger than that?
Oh, so much bigger. So if you think about the end-to-end passenger journey, you know, obviously there's bits that touch upon aviation, but you know, it's everything from the whole experience of checking in online. The moment you, Grace, you've decided you want to fly, you're encountering aviation. You're booking your
Mm.
flights, you're choosing your meal preferences, you're selecting a seat. All those things are part of what is classed as aviation. You know, you go
Mm.
into the airports, you're navigating your way around, whether you're self-service checking in and bag dropping or whether you're going to speak to an agent. That's all aviation. You know, the
Mm.
whole end-to-end journey from going through compliance, security, experiencing, you know, the commercial offerings, the experiential offerings, all the way through to departure, whether you're connecting, and then the piece around arrivals is all part of aviation. And, you know, I'd
Mm.
go a step further. You know, aviation, when we speak about it in terms of inclusion, we're speaking about the travel experience. And for me, I think there are so many add-ons that are kind of bolted onto that whole concept of aviation. So even the point of getting a bus or getting a train or getting a taxi from your home to the airport would be what I would deem as part of that travel aviation experience. Even when
Mm.
you get to your end location at the hotel and you are booking your itinerary and things to do, that's an extension again of aviation. But by rule of thumb, it kind of, you know, talks about airlines, airports, service providers within the airport. So, you know, people who might handle your baggage, people who might provide any special assistance, people who operate within that airport space. So
Mm.
yeah, hopefully that kind of gives you a bit of an
It
idea of what
does.
it means, but also what it means to AVI Solutions as well.
Excellent. Because I think for me, I was like, that's a dumb question. But actually, I'm not the only person that wasn't sure. So I know that like some of our listeners are like, okay, so she can help us too. Excellent. Now, I like to talk about some anecdotes because I think the power of storytelling is really important, particularly when we're working in inclusion, for people to really understand kind of why we need it in certain spaces. So, I was with a friend on the weekend and she was telling me about a recent experience that she had catching a business class flight. I can't remember the specifics of hers, but it reminded me of an incident that I had when I traveled. I think it was early last year or mid last year. I flew with, I think it was BA actually, because I love flying with BA. I love them. And I decided to treat myself and I was like, I'm going to fly business class. And I got my boarding pass. I went to the gate, and at the gate, you know, when you go through the initial kind of where they check your passport and your boarding pass, and they let you in to sit down and wait for boarding. So as I approached the lady at the desk, there was a white family in front of me, so white man, woman, and two kids. And before they even spoke or showed the person any documentation, she said, "Over here to business class, please, sir." Didn't acknowledge the wife, didn't check the ticket, nothing. He looked at her and he laughed and he said, "I absolutely love that you thought I was in business class, but I'm flying in economy." And she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Over there, please, sir." She let them through. They went and sat in economy. And then I approached with my boarding pass and held it out to her. She didn't even look at my boarding pass. And she said, "Thank you, madam. Over to the left for economy." And so I looked at her smiling with my boarding pass out, didn't say anything. And then she could obviously, because I'm looking at her, I'm not moving. She's thinking, what's the issue? So she looks at my boarding pass and then goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Over here to business class." And I literally laughed and then walked over to business class. I didn't say a word, but I was irritated. And I just thought, how could you? And it was just so obvious. Like, it was an obvious bias. It was an obvious prejudice. And I felt like her heart was probably in her throat. Like you could see that she was embarrassed. She felt sick. She was ashamed. It was an unconscious bias that has presented itself so obviously. And I think it would have been easy to say, oh, you know, it was an innocent mistake or whatever, or, you know, maybe whatever. But if I hadn't witnessed what had happened with the white family right in front of me, right before I got there, I might not have even clocked to a certain extent, or it might not have stood out as poignantly to me. But that, for me, is a perfect example of why we still need some inclusion work done in aviation, because there is that assumption that certain people that look a certain way will fly business class and certain people that don't look like them will fly economy, right? And that was very similar to the experience that my friend had, except that her experience was, so the person that was checking the boarding passes in my experience was a white woman, but for my friend it was actually a black woman that was checking. And she said that the exact same thing happened to her. And then but even before she got to the gate, she was, because she's got more points than me. So when she flies, she gets to go in the Concorde room with BA, I think it is, like their really, really posh first class lounge, right? So she went to the Concorde room and then needed to go to before she got there, she was on her way to the Concorde lounge. She needed to go to the toilet. So she went to the toilet. And then when she came out, it was her first time going to the Concorde lounge. So she didn't know the way. So she asked a member of staff, "Please, could you direct me back towards the Concorde lounge?" And they said, "Are you sure you want to go to the Concorde lounge?" And she said, "Yes, please." And they then repeated the question, "Are you sure it's the Concorde lounge you're looking for?" She again replied, "Yes, please." They then asked her 2 more times before she said, "Yes, I am looking for the Concorde lounge." And what blows my mind again about that situation is not only the obvious prejudice, because you've asked the question 4 times, so you definitely think she's going to the wrong place, but the fact that if you're not meant to be in the Concorde lounge, you don't know it exists. Like, it's not like there's an obvious sign in the airport that says Concorde lounge, you know, you don't know it exists unless you've explicitly been told, because your ticket says that's where you have access to. So when she told me about that, I was like, wow, there's still some work to be done, because 2024, things have changed in terms of class and, where people are, things that people can access, the money that we make, etc. Um, but there's still kind of historic preconceptions that hold us back a bit. What has been your experience in terms of potentially, the customer experience around bias, and the work that maybe employees or organizations within aviation identify still needs to be done in that space?
So yeah, an awful lot of things come up when you mention and you talk through both of those stories. And the first thing to say is I resonate with both of them. As someone who used to have to travel for work quite a lot, and often that was business class, the constant questioning and are you sure you're in the right queue, or
Mm.
can I help you, madam? You seem lost. Do I don't feel lost. I feel I know exactly where I'm meant to be. Maybe in your mind, based on your perceptions, I'm lost because you don't
Yeah.
understand that someone like me is meant to be here. And
Mm.
I think that there becomes a point where it might be uncomfortable and embarrassing for them, but what does that mean for the passenger experience?
Mm.
If I paid a lot of money, which a lot of people do anyway, just for economy tickets, but for
Yeah.
business and first class, and then you are questioning me like I don't belong, what does that say for me feeling included in part of that whole experience? It
Mm.
tells me indirectly that it doesn't matter that I've purchased this ticket. It doesn't matter that I am expecting a level of service that should be provided with this ticket and as an airport, that I'm going to get what you think I deserve because of the preconceptions and the biases that you hold about people like me. And it's
Mm.
very dangerous because, for me, it almost lends itself to other situations whereby people are asking for help and they're being dismissed because, again, there's a bias about what they should or shouldn't know, or what they shouldn't or shouldn't be able to access in terms
Mm.
of getting that support. So for me, it's just a very scary space for people who are traveling to have to be in. And, from what I've seen in terms of some of the scenarios or the situations I've been around, there are so many people that travel through the airport that have challenges anyway. But I
Mm.
find that people from marginalized communities experience it harder because there isn't the right level of understanding around their experience. And it's not for want of trying. I know a lot of airports and organizations in the aviation sector roll out training, but to shove someone in a room for 4 hours or 8 hours and tell them this is what you should be doing, and then pushing them out into an operation isn't going to get you to see the results that you want to see. It
Yeah.
really is about immersing them in that experience. What does it mean if you are a wheelchair passenger and you're stuck on an aircraft for 4 hours because no one can locate your wheelchair?
Mm.
What does it mean if you're a young mother who's expected to have to nurse her child in a toilet because no one, is happy to see you nursing your child out in the open? You
Mm.
know, what does it mean to be someone who's transgender who has to present themselves at security, and then you've got people joking or remarking about, well, who's searching this one?
Mm.
All of these things. And it's about, again, creating that psychological safety where knowledge can be shared, but also, staff can ask questions. We do not know what we don't know, and we do not
Yeah.
necessarily always know how to treat people, especially if these are people we haven't encountered. But
Mm.
that is no longer an excuse if you're providing service for all of those people. If
Yeah.
you want them to come into your spaces and spend money and talk about how great your airport is, you need to understand how best to treat them in a way that they want to be treated. And for me, it's just about turning the dial up on this, really drawing in those perspectives, asking those individuals, what would make this journey exceptional for you? What is missing at the moment? What more could we be doing? And that isn't always about technology or automation. Sometimes it can be how we address and speak to each other. Sometimes
Mm.
it can be, offering help rather than insisting, I'm going to help you. I had a friend who uses a wheelchair, and again, she was stuck on the aircraft for a while they had to relocate her wheelchair. So it meant that she wasn't shopping, she wasn't eating, she
Yeah.
wasn't enjoying herself. She was just sat there waiting whilst people were on board the aircraft cleaning it and replacing the food and everything else, stuff that she shouldn't have to see.
Mm.
Finally, when she did get off the aircraft, because of the short time that she had to get to the departure gate, she was literally wheeled to the departure gate. And she said, I'm perfectly able, to maneuver myself there. I navigate spaces all the time. I
Mm.
don't need you pushing my chair. Oh, no, no, no. the person who was obviously trying to help, we've got such a short amount of time, I've got to get you there quickly so you don't miss your flight. And I thought, Grace, can you imagine if you were, as able-bodied people, we're sat on an aircraft, we are held back for hours, and then we're frog marched off the airport and dragged to the departure gate because time is running out, and then at the end of all of that being expected to be grateful about it. I didn't want to be pushed. I wanted to be empowered.
Yeah.
They're different things. And, this is why with the work that we do at Avi-I Solutions, we do talk about a lot about the passenger journey and the passenger experience not being the same thing. In essence, yes, that my friend had to wait on the aircraft for a while, but her journey, apart from that delay in waiting for her chair, was relatively seamless in that all the touch points she hit, she was able to get to departure gate and on the aircraft. But the experience was horrendous because she was left feeling excluded. She was left feeling that she didn't have control over her own journey. She was not empowered. She was not, engaged with or bought into the solution. She was just told, this is what we're doing. And then at the end of it, you should be grateful.
Yeah.
So for me, there is just so much that needs to be done in terms of just educating people around what might be what you want isn't necessarily what everybody else wants. And let's understand what people want and give them that.
Absolutely. What are some of the barriers that you come across to inclusion in aviation?
So barriers I come across, first of all, and I think I've mentioned it quite a bit so far, is that lack of connection to passenger insights and what the passengers are experiencing and feeling. They're the ones that are going through that journey. We need to be working more closely with them. I think other barriers are things like representation. It's great to have organizations that are diverse, but where is that diversity? Where is that representation showing up? When it comes to talking about the customer experience, are we just bringing in people at key points where we think we might have a challenge, or are we having them cast their eyes over the entire end-to-end journey to understand where there might be pain points that we don't necessarily see because we don't experience that? There's a massive lack of knowledge around cultural competence. And when we talk about culture, Grace, it's not just about people from different backgrounds or different ethnicities and races. Culture is broader than that. Culture is, ways in which you do things, how you operate, how you practice a certain type of behavior. How are we really factoring that into a lot of the work that we do and understanding the different types of demographics of passengers that come through the doors? We're not. We're assuming that it's a one fit all a lot of the time, and that people, are happy with that, when a lot of the time they're not happy with that. Other barriers are, I guess, priority on passengers who fit within the category of norm. When we talk about that wonderful experience and enhancing it, it has to be for everybody. It has to be for every single person because, in true inclusion, everyone is welcome to travel through your doors as a passenger. It can't be those that are able-bodied, that are tech savvy, that, look a certain way, that have a particular passport, that are getting that exceptional experience. It should be everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's so many barriers, but obviously opportunities in overcoming those barriers as well.
Yeah. Are there any, because obviously when we think about the financial sector, there's a lot of pressure being put on organisations by the FCA at the moment to look at inclusion and kind of ethnicity data, etc. Are there any kind of expectations or mandatory requirements on aviation organisations around inclusion?
So yeah, there's a lot of work being done. I think at the moment the focus is really around accessibility, and accessibility in terms of physical accessibility. So having the right infrastructure in place, so people who have got challenges around mobility and navigating an airport have got the right means and infrastructure assets in place to support them with that. That is becoming, more and more mandatory across numerous airports. There's also a lot of work being done in the, the neurodivergent space in terms of creating, spaces and services that accommodate and support those individuals or people who are traveling with individuals who have challenges through the airport. There's some, I'd say, some regulations around racial profiling and things like that. But again, the thing is where it's probably a lot easier to kind of pick out where someone isn't getting a great service because they're in a wheelchair. It's not so easy to do the same for if it's because a person's from a particular racial background. You've
Mm.
got things in place that allow you to profile people. And profiling is about obviously making sure that individual is behaving and acting in the right way that isn't going to pose any type of threat to the airport, to security, to other passengers. And often, the excuse of targeting and picking on certain people is kind of chalked down to, well, we profiled you, or the one that you often get is you were randomly picked by a system. you know
Mm.
how random is it if it's every single time you're the person that's being picked and you look a particular
Yeah.
way? So, there are things in place, but there's also an awful lot of work to be done. And, with a lot of what is, you've obviously got legislation, but you've also got regulations and things within the airports. A lot of the systems that support that, for example, a lot of the automation that supports that is being programmed by people who are not the people who are necessarily using it. So it
Mm.
usually begs the question of what are the algorithms doing when it comes to someone like me or someone like yourself or someone who's different presenting themselves at, for example, an e-gate. Is it going through the right processes? Is it, without realizing it, discriminating because it's been programmed to do so? So it's all of
Mm.
these things that just definitely kind of worth thinking about and factoring in when we are looking at, how we can make the journey better for all passengers.
Definitely. So if I'm someone that leads on inclusion in my organization in the aviation space, what would your call to action be to me?
So great question. It would be to really have a look at, your passenger end-to-end journey, and really have a look at what the data that you currently have tells you about that. You know, is everybody having that great exceptional experience? Are there pain points? Are there, obstacles within that process? Do what is required. So whether that's an audit or, some internal assessments, find out what needs to be done and then take action.
Mm.
There is so much to gain from being inclusive, and not just from a passenger perspective, but from an organizational perspective. And if you're in the business of being in business, you want to be making more money and providing great service and, future proofing your organizations.
Mm.
Also, really think about the fact that Gen Z and Alpha and the generations that are coming prioritize inclusion. And at the moment, they are nearly half of the people that are traveling.
Mm.
Want to be really talking to your future customers and future proofing your businesses and making them sustainable for all. And, for me, it's just really then about understanding, what needs to be done and how you can go about doing it. So, you know, if you're someone who's in the inclusion space in your organization, start with audits, assessments, have a look at what needs to be done, engage with somebody, reach out, collaborate. It doesn't have to be with a consultancy, it can be with, resources you have within your, organization. But get people to feed in and get those that are impacted the most to feed into the solution, because
Mm.
you empower them in being part of the change that they want to see because it directly impacts on them.
Amazing. And are there any aviation organizations that you feel are doing well in their inclusion journey?
Yeah, so I'm a former Heathrow employee, so lots of the stuff that I've seen that's done really well is at Heathrow. I've travelled through there quite a bit, but like I've mentioned, I've also been really fortunate to travel through lots of airports throughout the world. I've seen some great examples of excellent passenger experiences in airports. Like, for example, the airport in Atlanta, Georgia, that was a really enjoyable passenger experience. And even like when I traveled to the Caribbean, again, it's just understanding the person who's traveling,
Mm.
understanding that sometimes, in some of the Caribbean airports, the facilities aren't necessarily on par with what you're seeing in places like the UK or in America. But
Mm.
oh my goodness, the customer service, you know, whether or not your bag has arrived on time, the warmth and the care that you receive, you just, again, that's the point I mean about the journey and the experience.
Mm.
There might be hiccups in the journey, but the experience is exceptional because of the way, people really kind of come together and guide you through that process and take you through that journey in a supportive and caring way. So, there's so many great examples, and there's, little bits I'll see across different airports, some nice little innovations that I think, oh, that's really clever. That's really, really, really nice. That's really fun. I saw a library in one airport and I thought that's a
Wow.
really good use of space. I've seen I've seen showers in another open to all. I thought that's a useful facility to have because people might want to freshen up. I've seen little booths that have been, designed for mothers who are nursing children. I thought that's a nice way of giving maybe a little bit of, privacy if they require it, but also not cutting them off away from everybody else, like they're meant to be ashamed of what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I just thought there's so many great things that are out there, but there is still an awful lot of work. And, all we need to do is to go onto social media and see that things are still happening that shouldn't be happening in 2024 around inclusive air travel.
Absolutely. So how do people engage with you?
So reach out to me. I am here to be of service. So whether or not you choose to work with us or not, I will always be able to provide you with some type of value. If you find me on LinkedIn, as far as I know, I am the only Nzinga Orgill in the whole world. Or I like to think that I am. No, honestly, I've checked. I don't think there is anybody else with the same name. Wow, how special am I? We are all special. But reach out to me on LinkedIn and just engage with me. If you don't want to necessarily reach out and book a call, feel free to follow my content. I am posting every single day on aviation inclusion. I'm sharing events like masterclasses and some of the activities that I'm part of. And feel free to follow my journey or to get in touch. But like I said, here to be of service in any way that I can and that we can.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today and for continuing on despite our technical difficulties. It's been such a good conversation. I have obviously learned a lot about aviation today. And I think, the good thing is people have a clearer understanding of how broad your remit is and the type of organizations that should be reaching out to you for support or just for a conversation. And also the continued work that needs to be done in this space as well. So I commend you for doing the work that you do. I think it's definitely needed. It's going to be impactful. And it should mean that, my daughter, for example, has an amazing experience when she is old enough to travel alone. But thank you so much for joining me today, Nzinga. I've really enjoyed the conversation and it's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute joy. And keep doing what you're doing as well, Grace. I see you.
Thank you. This podcast is brought to you by Acquaintance Consulting. We'd love it if you could take a minute at the end of this podcast to follow, subscribe, whichever is easier or available for you on the platform that you're listening to us on. We're really keen to grow this channel and really impact equality, diversity and inclusion across the world. And with your support, we can do just that.